Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the billionaire persona and look at an origin story that, honestly, nobody really talks about at those massive shareholder meetings. Long before the reusable rockets, before the electric cars, and way before he became the world's richest man, there was a very different reality. So we're going to look closely at the early forces that shaped him, using historical accounts to figure out exactly where all that relentless drive comes from.
Because there's this wild, stark contrast between the global icon we know today and the reality of his youth. We all know the expectation, right? The world's richest man, this larger-than-life tech visionary who basically operates without limits. But the actual reality? He was a lonely, bullied kid growing up in Pretoria, South Africa. And to really get the visionary, we absolutely have to understand that kid first.
Chapter 1. A Volatile, Divided Home.
So the disruption in his early life happened pretty fast. He was born in Pretoria in 1971, but his world totally fractured when he was just 8 years old, and his parents, May and Errol, divorced. Following that split, a young Elon eventually chose to live primarily with his father. Now, that was a massive decision, and as he said in later interviews, it's one he would profoundly regret. Biographer Walter Isaacson describes this home environment as being completely marked by emotional volatility. Instead of finding a safe haven, Musk faced a really difficult and at times outright abusive presence. We're talking about enduring hours of verbal humiliation. So yeah, definitely not the nurturing childhood you typically expect for a future tech mogul.
Chapter 2. The Hostile Outside World. And unfortunately, school offered zero escape. He just didn't fit in with his peers. For starters, he started school early, so he was always younger than the other kids. Plus, he was super bookish and pretty socially awkward. But the real kicker? He had this habit of constantly correcting people, backed up by a near-photographic memory. You know how kids are. Those traits didn't exactly win him popularity contests. They made him an immediate target. And the physical toll of all this isolation was absolutely devastating. The bullying he went through wasn't just your standard playground teasing. It was severe, it was sustained over years, and it was incredibly violent. He was actually beaten by a group of boys so badly that he ended up hospitalized on at least one occasion. That absolute nightmare only stopped when he finally transferred to a totally different high school. It really helps to add a little context to those social struggles, too. Musk has since connected his childhood difficulty in reading social cues to traits associated with Asperger's syndrome. Actually, he publicly confirmed this during a pretty famous TV appearance back in 2021. It sheds a lot of light on why navigating all those childhood social dynamics was just so incredibly hard for him. So think about it. Where do you go when the outside world is openly hostile and your own home is completely chaotic? Well, you escape. He found a massive psychological refuge in books. He literally read everything in his local library and then just moved straight on to reading entire encyclopedias. But science fiction? That became his ultimate obsession. He dove into these fictional worlds where being different wasn't framed as a weakness at all. It was basically a superpower. Chapter 3. Finding Control in Code. $500. That's how much he made at just 12 years old. After getting his hands on a computer at age 10 and completely teaching himself to code, he sold his very first video game, a program called Blastar, to a computer magazine. It's really the first incredible spark of those entrepreneurial instincts we see today. But here is the absolute crucial takeaway. For him, writing code wasn't just some fun hobby for a smart kid. It was his very first taste of absolute control in a life where he essentially had zero. I mean, think about it. His home was volatile, his school was literally violent. But a computer offers a world with clear, unbroken rules. It's a space where your direct effort translates exactly into predictable results. For him, it wasn't just a machine, it was a lifeline. Chapter 4. Escaping to North America. By his late teens, his one overriding goal was just to get out. He strategically used his mother's Canadian citizenship to carve an escape route, partly to avoid the mandatory military service in South Africa at the time. So he arrives in Canada at just 17, practically broke, and works these grueling odd jobs, like literally shoveling grain on a farm. Eventually, he makes his way to university before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the US. It is a massive leap from being a bullied kid in Pretoria to a broke immigrant chasing this vague dream in America.
Chapter 5. What the Childhood Built.
When you look at it, the connection between his youth and his adult life is actually mind-blowing.
Biographers point to this crystal clear pattern. The exact same traits that made his youth so painful became his ultimate driving forces. That desperate need for control, that translates directly into a CEO who bulldozes through impossible industries. His total refusal to accept no for an answer is exactly what it took to launch reusable rockets at SpaceX and mass-produce electric cars at Tesla when everyone said it was impossible. But that intense protective shell he had to build, yeah, that manifests today as some pretty intense workplace volatility.
Now, we have to be objective and note something super important here. While his incredibly difficult past explains his adult volatility and that relentless drive, it doesn't excuse his behavior toward the people close to him. People in his adult life have described experiencing a very similar volatility to the kind he grew up with. His childhood is a historical thread that explains his present. It's not a redemption arc that just erases it. In a lot of ways, he never really stopped trying to build his own world, kept safely under his own control.
As we wrap up this explainer, whatever you might think of Elon Musk's today, his origin story really forces us to look differently at the titans of our era. I want to leave you with this thought to consider. The next time you see a larger-than-life figure dominating the headlines, how often are the loudest, most dominant personalities actually shaped by the quietest, most painful rooms? Thanks so much for joining me as we unpacked the history behind the man. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.